And I know there's a lot of folks that are making the case that Ohio State could lose 3 games this year. And I'm not saying it's not plausible. It is. But what I would say is this. Number one, I think it's going to help for Ohio State to have back all their skill players because they're going to get back pretty much all their running backs, all their wide receivers. And I think they should, again, have the best wide receivers in the country because I think Ibuka and, Marvin Harrison's the best wide receiver in the country, and it's not even close, right, Mark?
No, it's not close.
And then I would say Ibuka's got to be one of the 5 or 6 best receivers in the country coming back this year. And tell me another team in college football that's got that. So, and they're going to have back every single running back that was on the roster. And, now provided they're healthy, I think that, that's going to be the question. Their question is going to be also they've got to replace a couple key offensive linemen, as you guys talked about on the Buckeye show.
Yeah, I was just going to say one of our better discussions over the past few weeks has been about the offensive line, and it's.
Yeah, no, those tackles are going to be tough to replace, especially. I mean, I knew Johnson was Johnson's going to be a top 15 pick. He was gone. DeJuan Jones, you can make a case, but he's probably going somewhere in the second round. I was surprised they lost the center. Although I guess one good game against Jalen Carter in the draft that, gets you in the second or third round, I guess is reason enough to leave early nowadays. But that's where college football's at. But although Whippler's a solid player. But yeah, that to me is the key. I will say this. I do think that their defense is going to be better in the second year under Jim Knowles. I do expect a little bit more improvement on the defensive side of the ball. At least I'm banking that I don't see an all-time bad secondary again. That's what I'm really hoping for. Because that was the thing that really killed them. Their pass defense, their secondary in particular, that I told you all year, and you saw it in the last 2 games, was the killer.
Well, not that they could have done better against inferior opponents and not given up as many gash plays, but as Knowles has outlined, for whatever reason, those are part of the formula.
Yeah, I'm not buying that.
You just have to live with it. Well, I think that's a horrible thing for him to admit to or say, or design a defense where you get gashed 5 times a game.
Sure.
And if you think about getting gashed, just think about where you are on the field. If you get gashed from your own 20-yard line, if you're a defense and they're in the red zone,
sure,
and they gash you on a run, well, they were going to kick a field goal at least anyway, or probably have a 70 to 75% chance of scoring a touchdown anyway. So that play hurt, but that doesn't hurt nearly as bad as when that same play breaks at the other team's 25-yard line and you can't catch the back, i.e. Donovan Edwards, and he runs 75 yards for a touchdown. You can't break down there.
Right. Well, sometimes it also comes back, you have to adjust to your personnel. Tomlin, Mike Tomlin for the Steelers, they were playing a ton of zone a few years ago in the NFL, like 5 or 6 years ago. He was asked, well, why don't you play more man coverage? You know what his answer was? We don't have the corners to play man. And, sometimes it comes down to the Jimmies and Joes. I mean, you got to have if you're going to play man coverage, guess what? You better have good enough corners to play man, or you're going to have to adjust. Because eventually you're going to find a passing game that exploits it. And that's why I don't understand. Some of these defensive coaches have got to be a little bit more multiple with their fronts and their, coverages.
I would think that any offense or defensive coordinator that's worth his weight at that level has to be ready with a plan B and a plan C. And I don't mean in game. I mean looking at the film from the previous season, evaluating the talent during winter workouts and then obviously in the spring, and thinking, okay, now I need to make a judgment. Where are we? What can we play? And it's great to have, and I think this is even more important on defense than it is on offense, the flexibility you're talking about, because you're responding to what the other team's doing.
Right.
Is to have hey, if everything's perfect and I got the personnel I want, this is my belief and conviction about the best way to play defense. But we don't have that. Therefore, what's best for this situation,
Sure.
especially understanding what is our offense going to give us,
Mm-hmm.
most likely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Sometimes you just have to adjust to your personnel, and
yeah, it just yeah. And Ohio State's defense was fine for 9 games.
Mm-hmm.
I think we both would take their performance in 9 games, but Maryland and Michigan were certainly not acceptable, and Penn State
Well,
wasn't
I
the
got a little.
greatest.
Yeah, I was going to say that, Mark. I got a little bit of a vibe. I know you're the. Are you the king of the Sean Clifford fan club? Or are you running it still? Or
I think his mom runs it, but I certainly support. I chime in when needed.
No, well, that was the game that kind of gave me a little bit of pause, is when Clifford tore us up, and then I had a little bit of trepidation when little Tua and those receivers were tearing us up. That's what I mean.
Well,
That
both of
was
those games, especially the Penn State game, but also the
yeah,
Maryland game, was just a strange defensive effort of this is a defense that's very talented, especially along the defensive line. And you and I had many conversations about the defensive front in
mhm,
the offseason. And I kept going back to, I know they're going to be good. I know that they're
yeah,
going to make there's just too much talent out there for them not to make plays on occasion, but they need to be a wrecking crew.
yeah,
And they were when they needed to be against Penn State, and they were when they needed to be against Maryland, but they still gave up a ton of yards and points the
yeah,
rest of the time.
yeah, yeah.
It was very much a
That's
feast or
secondary.
famine deal.
Yeah, just too many chunk plays. Yeah. Hey, last thing I want to point out. I did chime in on your. By the way, you're going to have your discussion with Mr. Dace tomorrow, and you were looking for a topic to add to that particular discussion. And I don't know if you guys have gotten to this. I put it into your comments. Is to talk about how the 12-team playoff could eventually affect the future of the power bases in college football from the standpoint of, I mean, Klatt made this point, and I think it's a good one. He says short term, you probably still see the same teams in the championship game and even winning national championships. But long term, does it spread out the talent more?
So he believes, and we've had this conversation,
Yeah.
that the open field, the more inclusiveness is going to attract recruits to other locations because they'll understand, okay, Penn State can get to a playoff. Uh, Fill in the blank can get to Oregon can get to a playoff on a
Mm-hmm.
regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Right. Think of programs that you would think that would be in that 10 to 12 kind of range,
Sure.
or even 8 to 12 kind of range, that they could get to a playoff, and maybe they get in and win a playoff game or two. And, not saying that they would get to the championship game or even win the national championship for that matter within the first year or two of the 12-team playoff. But maybe as playoffs continue to go, you see those upset happen. And, maybe over time, that moves the needle a little bit as far as recruiting goes.
Or think
That's what I think Klatt was trying to express with his point of view. And I think there could be some truth to that. Maybe a lot of truth to that.
or think about this. Yes, I do too. But think about this and afford me a little mercy because this isn't fully vetted by any stretch. It just hit me. How about
Yeah.
how about being that level of program, and if it's proven over 5 to 10 years that you're going to somewhat consistently make the playoff, but you're not what Clemson has been or Alabama, Ohio State, and you're going to, as a recruit, you're going to play extra playoff games, but you're not going to win a national championship. What if you're Penn State 10 years from now and you've made the playoffs 6 times
Mm-hmm.
and you've won a couple first round playoff games,
Mm-hmm.
lost a few, lost
Mm-hmm.
all the second round playoff games after you won the first round, and that's what you are.
Yeah. You're saying that you're just pigeonholed into that team pretty much going forward, you
You're the
know?
same program that you've been, but because of the format changing, it allows you opportunity, but you're not good enough to seize the opportunity for 3 consecutive games or 4 consecutive games. That's a lot to ask.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not crazy about it. Although, and I'm a really big NFL guy. I was never crazy about the 17 game schedule or even adding a seventh team to the playoffs. I mean, I was okay. And I know everybody says more football is all this, but listen, I've lived in a football world you have for 40 some years with a 16 game NFL schedule. And somehow it worked out okay for that long a period of time, Mark.
Some people are going to get mad at us for talking NFL for a few minutes, but that's too bad. So, because I have always loved the NFL, I don't have the expertise in it that I once did because I used to know more about the NFL than college football.
Hmm.
Uh, so now I just enjoy the games. And so, for example, like this past weekend with so much going on, I didn't really see much of anything. But the previous weekend, I like watched everything.
Hmm.
And I'm like you. I still can't get used to number one, what has to be proven or confirmed or justified by a 17th game that we didn't find out the first 16 games. And it's also
Right.
just an odd number.
Right. Right.
So
Well,
that's number one.
yeah.
And then the second point was just once we get to the playoffs with this extra seed, I get kind of lost with who's against who and where are we in all of this. And it used to just, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but with the one extra team, there's an extra game played. And so it was just more formatted where I knew exactly, okay, it was just less convoluted or something in terms of we go wild card weekend, divisional weekend, championship games. Okay, I can keep track of all of that.
Yeah, and I know they compensated the players, Mark, and did all that. I'm sure they with the players union and all that. But to me, it just came back. Well, it came back to just, in a word, I think it just came back to the NFL being greedy. I mean, you want
I
to
do too.
strip everything away and get down to brass tacks. I think that's exactly what it's about.
And does this make any sense? In the same frame period of time that it's being constantly brought up and discussed about player safety,
Yep.
compensate them all you want. Aren't they making enough money
Yep.
for an average player, let's say average starting player in the NFL who has a 7 or 8 year career and is going to make $75 million? Does it really pay for him to make an extra $5 million in his career and risk injury of an extra playoff game and an extra regular season game?
Yeah. You know what NFL stands for, Mark, right? Not for long.